When the HOA fenced him out of the lake he loved, John didn't fight back. He bought the gate and changed the game forever. John had always believed that peace was not a place, it was a feeling. But if peace could be a place for him, it would be the lake behind his house. He had lived in the small lakeside neighborhood for nearly 12 years. The lake wasn't huge or famous, but it was beautiful. Calm, serene. Birds flying over the still water. Ducks paddling close to the shore, and in the early mornings, a thin layer of fog floating over the surface like a quiet secret only nature knew. That lake was John's escape from everything. Stress, city noise, even his own thoughts. Every morning, John followed the same routine. He would wake up early, before most of the neighborhood, make himself a cup of coffee, and walk down the small grassy path behind his house. That path led to the lake's edge. And from there, he would either sit on a small, foldable chair with his fishing rod, or take his kayak out if the weather was good.
Ow.
The path wasn't officially part of his property, but it had always been there, used by everyone in the neighborhood for decades. Kids would run there to skip stones, couples would walk by in the evenings, and older folks like John would just sit quietly and listen to the wind or watch the clouds. The community itself was small, it's peaceful, and made up mostly of retired folks, quiet families, and a few new couples who had recently moved in. It had an HOA Homeowners Association, like many such places do. What? For years, the HOA wasn't too strict. They kept things tidy, sent newsletters once in a while, and organized potlucks or lake cleanup days. No one really had any problems. John never even bothered attending their meetings. It all seemed to run fine without his attention. But over the past year, things had started changing. A new group of board members had taken over the HOA. Younger, louder, and very focused on rules. They said they wanted to make the neighborhood more secure, more professional, and more controlled. They added new regulations, some of them strange. Suddenly, residents were told they couldn't keep flower pots outside unless they matched the color scheme of the house. No more lawn decorations. All fences had to be the same shade of gray. Notices started appearing in mailboxes for tiny issues like grass being half an inch too tall or trash bins being left outside. For more than 1 hour after collection, at first, John found it a bit silly. He wasn't the kind to get involved in politics or neighborhood arguments. Just rolled his eyes, made jokes to his neighbor Steve, and kept doing his thing. He still went down the path to the lake every day, fishing rod in hand, kayak tied. Up near the shore, no one had said anything about the lake. Not yet. But there was a feeling, a strange one, like something was changing underneath the surface, like a storm was coming slowly, quietly. And then, one Tuesday afternoon, it happened. John had gone into town for a few hours. He needed groceries, a haircut, and a few supplies for a small garden bed he was building. Nothing out of the ordinary. When he returned home, he parked his car in the driveway and immediately noticed something different. There was a tall metal fence now standing at the back of his property, blocking the entrance to the lake path. His first reaction was confusion. He blinked, thinking maybe he was imagining it. But no, it was real. A silver fence, clean and shiny, stretched from one end of the pathway to the other. In the middle of it, a gate with a padlock. Just like that, the path was closed off. John dropped his grocery bag right there in shock. He walked up to the gate, held the bars, rattled it a bit. It was locked tight. He looked around for a sign, for an explanation. Anything? There was none. He went back inside, grabbed his phone, and called the number listed on the last HOA notice he'd received. A woman answered, said her name was Claire. She was the new HOA president. Young, efficient-sounding, and with a voice that had zero emotion in it. John introduced himself and got straight to the point. There's a fence blocking the lake path. What's going on? Oh yes, Claire said, almost like she was talking about the weather. The board voted to secure lake access due to liability concerns. Only authorized residents will be issued keys upon request. What do you mean by authorized? I've been using that path for over 10 years, John replied, trying hard to stay calm. Claire's voice stayed flat. "We understand that, sir. But that land is not part of any individual homeowner's property. It's a shared green area. And after reviewing the legal documents, the board decided that restricted access was necessary for safety, insurance, and maintenance purposes. You're welcome to submit a written request for key access. The board will review it and decide." "You're kidding me," John said. "So I have to apply to use the path I've been walking every day for 12 years? "That is correct." "Right. Who decides if I'm allowed?" "The board." John could feel his blood pressure rising. "And what if the board says no?" Claire paused. "Then you will not be granted access. Have a good day." She hung up before John could say another word. That night, John didn't sleep well. He lay in bed staring at the ceiling, feeling something strange in his chest, a mix of anger, disbelief, and betrayal. He had always been a peaceful man. He didn't pick fights. He didn't argue with neighbors. Something about this quiet little betrayal, this cold, sneaky move, lit a fire in him that he hadn't felt in years. The next morning, he went down to the fence again. Still locked, still blocking the only simple joy he cared about, being near the water, John went to the HOA office the same day. It was a small building on the edge of the neighborhood, meant mostly for storage and meetings. Inside, a few people sat at desks with folders and laptops. Claire was there too, young, sharp-dressed, and surrounded by paperwork. She greeted John like she barely remembered who he was. "I'm here to request access to the lake," he said, holding back the urge to yell. Claire handed him a form 2 pages long,
asking for details like purpose of use, times, and even
a clause saying he accepted liability and agreed to HOA monitoring if needed. "This is ridiculous," John muttered, but he took the form anyway. He filled it out, gave it back, and waited a week later. He got a letter in his mailbox.
"A board
Had denied his request. No explanation. Just a box checked next to application, denied, insufficient justification for lake access. That was it. That was the moment something inside John snapped. He walked straight to his neighbor, Steve's house. Steve had lived there even longer than John, and told him what happened. Steve was just as shocked. Together they went door to door talking. 2 other neighbors. Some hadn't even realized the path was closed. Others were also angry but afraid to speak out. The worst part? The board had voted without a community meeting. They made the decision in private. They installed the fence in a single day while most people were at work. Now they held the only keys. John couldn't stop thinking about it. Every time he looked out his back window and saw that fence, he felt a mixture of rage and helplessness. He wasn't just being locked out of the lake. He was being told that his history, his routine, his quiet connection with nature meant nothing. But John wasn't going to sit back anymore. Something had to change, and change, as it turned out, was already quietly waiting for him, just not in the way he expected. John couldn't stop thinking about the fence. Every time he looked out of his kitchen window and saw that tall silver gate blocking the lake path, it felt like a slap to the face. The same path he had walked for over 12 years was now locked behind cold steel and a padlock. He didn't want to be angry, but he was. He felt like a part of his life had been stolen. At first, John tried to stay calm. He believed maybe it was just a mistake, that once the HOA understood how important the path was to the community, they'd remove the gate, or at least give him and others proper access. But after the rejection letter arrived, all hope disappeared. The letter was short, cold, and without reason. Just a small tick mark on the words, "Application denied. Insufficient justification for lake access." No signature, no explanation. John felt insulted. He had lived in the neighborhood longer than most people on the HOA board. He'd never caused trouble, always paid his dues on time, always kept his house neat, and had helped during community cleanups. Yet now, a group of people he barely knew had locked him out of something that felt like part of his soul. He tried again. This time he wrote a polite email to the HOA. He explained his history with the lake. He told them how he fished there, how it helped his mental peace, how he never disturbed anyone. He even attached a few pictures, old ones, of him and his late wife sitting near the shore during sunsets, laughing, holding hands. No reply. A week later, he got another letter. Same message. Access denied. It was no longer just about a gate or a key. It was about control, about pride. And it felt like the HOA was trying to send a message that they were in charge now. John realized something that hit him hard. This wasn't going to be fixed by being polite. Still, he didn't want to fight. He wasn't the kind of person who shouted at meetings or filed lawsuits. But he couldn't sit and do nothing either. One evening, while talking to Steve, his neighbor and longtime friend, John shared how helpless he felt. Steve shook his head. It's unbelievable. They didn't even ask the neighborhood. Just did it like they owned the whole place. You know who actually owns that piece of land? John asked. Steve blinked. I assumed it was part of the community green space. Same here, but something doesn't feel right. That night, John sat at his computer and started searching. He went to the county assessor's website, the place where public land records are kept. He searched by address, street names, and eventually by parcel numbers. It wasn't easy. The system was old and clunky. But after about an hour, he found something strange. The narrow strip of land where the path ran, the same one now fenced, did not belong to the HOA. In fact, it didn't belong to the neighborhood at all. It was privately owned. The owner's name was listed as M. Langston. The record showed that the parcel had been inherited nearly 30 years ago and had never been sold or developed. There was no phone number, just an old mailing address from another state. John stared at the screen for a long time. A thought crept into his mind, a dangerous, crazy thought. What if that land was up for sale? The next day, John drove to the county recorder's office. He asked for any available contact information for M. Langston. The clerk was helpful. She gave John a forwarding address and suggested writing a letter. So John did. He kept it simple. He introduced himself, explained that he lived in a neighborhood where there was a small parcel of land leading to the lake, and asked if the owner had any interest in selling it. He included his phone number and email and mailed the letter. Half expecting nothing to come of it, days passed. A week later, John received an email. It was short, polite, and to the point. The sender was Margaret Langston, a woman in her 70s who lived in Oregon. She wrote, Dear Mr. John, I did receive your letter regarding the parcel near the lake. To be honest, I had nearly forgotten I even owned it. It was part of a group of properties my uncle left me years ago. I've never visited, and I've been meaning to sell that one. If you're interested, I'd be glad to discuss terms. John read that email 3 times. His heart beat faster with each read. He picked up the phone and called her. Margaret was kind, sharp-witted, and practical. She had no emotional connection to the land. Her uncle had owned several random plots in different states. She was finally getting around to letting go of the ones she didn't need. She was even a bit surprised someone cared enough to track her down. I was going to call a real estate agent next year, she said. But if you're ready now, we can save both of us time and money. They talked numbers. The price she offered was more than fair. John did some research, double-checked the value, and agreed. He hired a local lawyer to make sure all the documents were clean, and within 3 weeks, faster than he imagined, the deal was complete. John was now the legal owner of the narrow piece of land with the lake entrance, and the only person who had the legal right to access it. It felt surreal. Just a month ago, he had been denied access to the lake. Now, not only did he have that access back, it was his land. His gate, his rules. He walked down to the fence the day after the deal was finalized. He stared at the padlock for a long moment, then chuckled to himself. Slowly, he reached into his pocket and pulled out a shiny new key. The one the lawyer had given him after the paperwork was complete. He unlocked the gate, pushed it open, and stepped onto his land. The soft grass, the slight curve of the path, the scent of the lake air, it all felt different now. Like freedom. He didn't announce it to the neighborhood right away. He needed time to process. But soon, people started noticing. They saw John walking down the path again. The gate was still locked, but he had the key. Curiosity grew. Whispers started, and then the HOA called Claire, the president. Sounded different now. It's not as cold, not as sure. John, she said, we were surprised to see the gate being opened. We wanted to check if everything was all right. John smiled on the phone. Everything's great. I own that land now. There was a pause, then a cough, then an awkward "oh." I'd be happy to show you the documents if needed, he added. No, that's fine. We weren't aware. The board didn't expect that. Neither did I, he replied. But things change, don't they? The next few days were full of confusion in the HOA office. Residents started asking questions. Some came to John directly. Hey man, one neighbor said, are you seriously the owner of the lake path now? Yes, John replied. Can we still use it? John gave a small smile. That's up to the HOA. They're the ones who built the gate and made it restricted. The HOA held an emergency meeting. They tried to figure out if they could reverse the sale. They looked for legal loopholes. But the documents were airtight. Margaret had full rights to sell. And John had bought the land fair and legal. Eventually, had no choice but to accept it. And now, the gate they had installed to keep people out was keeping them out instead. John didn't throw parties. He didn't hang banners or give speeches. But quietly, calmly, he won. He had taken back his peace not by fighting, but by being smart, by being patient, and by doing what no one else thought of, owning the land they had tried to control. That silver gate still stood, but now, the only key that mattered, hung on a hook in John's kitchen. For the first time in weeks, John felt peace again. Not just because he got his lake access back, but because he had taken control in a smart way. He had not argued. He had not fought. He had simply gone around the problem and solved it. That gave him a kind of quiet pride he had not felt in years. The day after the land purchase became official, John stood by the lake alone. He looked at the calm water, breathed in the cool morning air, and smiled. It was exactly how he remembered. It's still beautiful and free. Only now it was his. He owned the path. The same path that once was taken from him with no warning, he now legally owned. The key to the gate hung in his pocket, and it felt heavier than it really was. Maybe because it carried meaning now more than just metal and lock. It was proof of patience, smart thinking, and not giving up. He sat on his foldable chair at the edge of the lake and watched the ripples move gently across the water. It reminded him of his wife, who used to sit next to him with a book in hand while he fished. Those memories were quiet but powerful. And now, with the lake peaceful again, they came back stronger than ever. He was not just sitting by a lake. He was sitting in a part of his life that felt right again. But while John felt peace, the rest of the neighborhood felt confusion. Word started spreading fast. People noticed John walking down the path again. Some saw the gate open when he used it. Others asked each other quietly, did the HOA remove the lock? The rumors grew. One morning, John's neighbor, a young man named Ryan, stopped him as he was returning from the lake. Hey, Mr. John, Ryan said, can I ask you something? Did you really buy the lake path? John nodded with a soft smile. Yes, I did. Ryan looked surprised. Whoa, that's crazy. So you own the land now? Every square foot of it? Ryan let out a low whistle. Man, that's wild. So, does that mean only you can use it now? John didn't answer right away, just gave a small smile and said, that depends. It didn't take long for the news to reach the HOA board. Claire, the president, called a board meeting immediately. Emails went out, and within 2 days, the 5 board members gathered inside their usual meeting room. Papers scattered across the table, concerned looks on their faces. I don't understand how this happened, one board member said. He just bought it? That is Illy? Claire rubbed her temples. We assumed that land was unclaimed or part of the common area. We never checked. We fenced off land we didn't own, another member added. That's not good. It's worse than that, Claire said. Now he has legal rights. We locked him out. Now he can lock us out. The room went silent. For years, the HOA had made rules, added fences, sent warning letters, and felt powerful. But now, all their rules meant nothing, at least not on the land John owned. And the path he controlled was the only direct access to the lake. Without that path, no one else could get there easily. The rest of the lake was surrounded by private houses and thick brush. That little gate. It had become everything. They decided to send John an official letter, polite, professional, and almost apologetic. It said the HOA recognized the ownership transfer and respected the rights of the new landowner. Then, it casually asked whether John would consider giving other residents shared access to the lake entrance. In the spirit of community unity, John read the letter. With a neutral face, he sat at his kitchen table, the paper in one hand and a cup of coffee in the other. He thought about it for a while. Then he wrote a short reply and mailed it the next morning. The reply said, "At this time, I do not wish to offer public access to my property. Any future changes will be at my discretion. Thank you for understanding." He didn't try to sound rude, but he was clear. The HOA had made their choice when they blocked him out. Now it was his turn. Soon after, neighbors began coming to him one by one. Some knocked on his door politely. Others waited for him outside while he returned from the lake. "Hi, John. I used to take my kids down to the lake. They loved skipping stones. Any chance we could get a key to the gate?" one woman asked. "I'm sorry," John said. "It's not a public path anymore. You'll have to take that up with the HOA. They made it private. I just bought what they fenced. But you could let us in, right?" "Could," he said kindly, "but I won't." Some neighbors understood. Some were angry. A few called him selfish. John didn't fight them. He didn't argue, just smiled, nodded, and walked away. The HOA wasn't ready to give up. A week later, Claire called John again. "We'd like to offer to buy the land back," she said. "We think it would be better for the neighborhood." John raised an eyebrow. "Interesting. And how much are you offering?" Claire gave him a number, more than he had paid, but not much more. John chuckled. "Let me think." "No." Claire's voice sharpened. "Why not? It's just a path." "Then why do you want it so badly?" he asked. She was silent. "It's not just a path," he continued. "It's what you tried to take from me, and now it's what I used to take it back." Claire didn't respond. She simply said goodbye and hung up. A few days later, John received another letter, this one, from the HOA's lawyer. It was full of formal language, asking for negotiation and amicable agreement regarding lake access. They didn't threaten, but the message was clear. They were trying everything they could to get control back. John visited his lawyer and showed him the letter. "They can't do anything," the lawyer said. "You bought it clean. Let them talk." John nodded. "That's all I needed to hear." After that, the HOA stopped calling. Months passed. John used the path every morning like before. He installed a small bench near the water and even added a wooden sign that said "Private property, no trespassing." It's not to scare people, just to make things clear. The peace he had once lost was fully back now, only better because this time it was protected by law. Slowly, the neighborhood adjusted. The HOA grew quieter. People stopped asking. Some still looked at John with mixed feelings, jealousy, maybe, or resentment, but he didn't care. The people who respected him stayed friendly. The ones who didn't, well, he didn't know them anything. He had been pushed into a corner once. They thought he would accept it. But instead, he outsmarted them all, calmly, quietly, and with patience. One morning, Steve walked over to John's yard holding 2 cups of coffee. "You did it," he said, handing 1 cup to John. "I guess I did," John replied. Steve laughed. "You know, they still can't believe it. The HOA, they're scrambling. They tried to own the gate," John said, "so I bought the key." Steve raised his cup to smart revenge. John smiled and took a sip. The lake shimmered in the background, calm as ever. This wasn't about revenge, really. It was about respect, about taking back what was taken from him, not with anger, but with wisdom. And that, John knew, was a kind of victory far greater than any argument could win. After John bought the land with the lake entrance, things changed quickly in the neighborhood. At first, people were surprised. Many neighbors didn't even realize that piece of land could be privately owned. They had always thought it belonged to the HOA or was just part of the shared community space. Now that John had the only key to the gate blocking the path, the power dynamics in the neighborhood shifted. For years, the HOA board had acted like they controlled everything. They decided on rules, set fines, installed fences, and told residents, What to do now? They found themselves locked out of a property they had fenced off without owning it. The irony was not lost on anyone at first. The HOA board members were stunned. Claire, the president, gathered the group for an emergency meeting. They needed to figure out how to respond. Their plans to secure the lake for residents' safety had backfired. Now they had to face a reality where their authority was questioned, and a single resident owned the only gate key. Did we make a mistake? One member asked nervously. Claire sighed. We fenced land that wasn't ours. That's the main problem. They discussed options. Could they buy the land back? Could they force John to sell? Could they get a court order? None of the ideas seemed simple. John had bought the land legally through a clean sale. The previous owner, Margaret Langston, had the full right to sell it to him. There was no loophole, no hidden contract, no technicality to reverse the deal. Meanwhile, John watched quietly as the HOA tried to regain control. A few weeks after the purchase, the HOA sent a formal letter asking John if he would consider sharing access to the lake entrance with the other residents. The letter was polite, even friendly in tone, carefully worded to sound cooperative. John, read the letter carefully. He knew what it really meant. Give us the key back, or let us in, or else. He considered it. For a moment he felt tempted to say yes. After all, this was his neighborhood too. He didn't want to be the bad guy. But then he remembered the way the HOA had acted, the fence suddenly going up without any notice. The cold rejection letters, the tone of control and power. It wasn't just about a gate anymore. It was about respect. He decided to write back. His reply was calm, respectful, but firm. He told them he was not willing to grant public access at the moment. The land was private property, and any future decisions would be his alone to make. The response was met with surprise, and even some frustration from the HOA they had expected. John to give in, to be reasonable. But John had learned that sometimes standing firm was necessary. Soon, their neighbors started approaching John. Some were polite and hopeful. John, said Mrs. Reynolds from down the street, my grandchildren, love coming to the lake. Is there any chance you could let us use the path? Maybe give us a key or something? John looked at her kindly. I'm sorry, but I can't do that. The HOA made it private. I just bought the land. But you have the power to open the gate, she said softly. I do, John replied. But that's a responsibility I have to take seriously. Others were less understanding. Some neighbors accused John of being selfish. Why are you keeping us out? They asked. This lake belongs to the whole community. John didn't argue. He explained that the lake wasn't owned by anyone in particular, but the land with the entrance was now his. The HOA's decision to fence it off changed everything. The tension in the neighborhood grew. Some residents felt angry with the HOA for not being transparent. Others were upset with John, blaming him for cutting off access. The HOA's board meetings became heated. Some members wanted to take legal action to regain the land or force access. Others worried that fighting John would split the community and cause more problems. Meanwhile, John kept using the lake path. Every morning he would unlock the gate with his key and walk down to the water. He even built a small wooden bench near the shore, a place where he could sit quietly and enjoy the peacefulness. He took care to keep the area clean, just as he always had. One day Claire called John again. This time, her tone was more serious. John, we want to talk about buying the land back. We're prepared to make a good offer. John smiled to himself. The HOA was trying to buy back the one thing they didn't own before the access point. He asked for their offer. It was a decent amount, but nothing close to what he felt the land was worth, not just in money, but in value and principle. He politely declined. The HOA tried again. This time, they increased the offer. They sent legal letters proposing a negotiation. But John stayed firm. To him, it wasn't about the money. It was about standing up to the group that had tried to take away something that was part of his life for so long. Residents noticed the back and forth. Some admired John's determination. Others grew frustrated at the tension between him and the HOA. Some neighbors chose sides, while many tried to stay neutral. One afternoon, John invited a few neighbors over for coffee in his backyard. He wanted to clear the air, share his story, and explain why he made the decisions he did. "I'm not trying to keep anyone out," he said honestly. "This land was private before the fence went up. I only bought it because no one else did. I wanted to protect the lake path, not use it as a weapon." Some neighbors listened carefully and thanked him for his honesty. Others remained skeptical. The months passed, and the HOA slowly realized that their power was limited. The gate remained locked most of the time. John was the only one with the key. Eventually, the HOA changed leadership. New board members came in, more open and willing to listen to residents. The tension eased. John didn't celebrate or brag. He simply enjoyed the quiet mornings by the lake again. He understood that sometimes standing your ground means accepting that not everyone will agree with you, but that doing what's right for yourself and your peace is more important than pleasing everyone. The lake, once closed off by a fence, had become a symbol of that truth, and John, with his key in hand, was at peace once more. The lake was calm again. John sat quietly on the small wooden bench he had built near the shore. The sun was beginning to rise, casting soft golden light across the water, making it sparkle like tiny diamonds. The breeze gently rustled the leaves. On the trees, carrying the fresh smell of earth and water, this was the peace John had longed for, the peace he had fought quietly but firmly to regain. It hadn't been an easy journey. Months of tension, frustration, and difficult conversations had tested him in ways he'd never expected. But now, sitting there by the water, he felt a deep sense of satisfaction. Not because he had won a battle, but because he had found his own way to protect what mattered to him. The fence was still there, standing tall and silver, with the gate locked tight. But John held the only key, the one that allowed him access to the lake. It was more than just a key to a gate. It was a symbol of patience, courage, and smart thinking. When others had tried to shut him out, he hadn't reacted with anger or bitterness. Instead, he had looked for a way forward, a way to regain control without causing more harm. The neighborhood had changed too. The HOA, after months of struggle and public pressure, finally agreed to hold open community meetings. The new leadership promised to be more transparent and listen to residents' concerns. The fence, once a symbol of exclusion, became a reminder of how important it was to respect everyone's rights and feelings. John's neighbors had mixed feelings about him. Some still thought he was stubborn or selfish. Others admired his quiet strength. Few even apologized for not standing up to the HOA themselves. But John didn't hold grudges. He understood that change was hard, and sometimes people feared. What they didn't understand, one morning, John received a letter from the new HOA president. It was short but warm, thanking him for his patience and cooperation. They asked if he would be willing to discuss ways to improve lake access for everyone, not by forcing it, but by working together. John smiled and replied that he was open to conversation when the time was right. For now, though, he was content with his private moments by the lake. The gentle sounds of water lapping against the shore, the calls of distant birds, and the cool morning air were enough. Sometimes he thought, people don't realize how much they take simple things for granted until those things are gone. The ability to walk freely to a place you love, to sit quietly in nature, to feel connected with something bigger than yourself. These are gifts that can be easily lost. John had learned that lesson well. When the HOA had put up the fence, it felt like losing a part of his world. But by buying the land and keeping the key, he had taken back more than just access to the lake. He had reclaimed his peace of mind and sense of belonging. Over the months, John continued to care for the land. He planted a few native flowers near the path, picked up litter when he saw any, and made sure the gate and fence were in good condition. It wasn't just his property, it was part of the community's natural beauty, and he treated it with respect. Sometimes families came by to admire the lake from a distance. Children waved from their bicycles as they passed by. John would smile and wave back, but kept the gate closed. One afternoon, a young woman approached him while he was sitting by the water. She introduced herself as Emily, a new resident who had recently moved into the neighborhood. "I heard about what you did," she said. Buying that land and standing up to the HOA, it's really inspiring. John chuckled softly. It wasn't about standing up to anyone. It was about protecting something important to me. Emily nodded. It's a lesson for all of us. Sometimes we just have to be patient and smart, not angry. They talked for a while about the lake, the neighborhood, and hopes for the future. Emily said she looked forward to better days for the community, days when everyone could enjoy the lake without fences or fights. John agreed. But he knew it would take time. That evening, as the sun set behind the trees and painted the sky with pink and orange hues, John sat on his bench again. The water reflected the colors like a mirror, calm and endless. He felt grateful for the lake, for the quiet strength that had carried him through. He understood now that life sometimes challenges us in unexpected ways, closing doors to test our patience, forcing us to find new paths. And when we do, when we choose wisdom over anger, when we stand firm yet kind, we discover a peace deeper than we imagined. The fence was still there, but it no longer felt like a barrier. It was a boundary, yes, but one that reminded John of the journey he had taken, of the quiet courage that had helped him reclaim his place by the lake. And as the stars began to twinkle overhead, John closed his eyes, breathing in the cool night air, feeling at home. The lake was his again, not just because he owned the land, but because he had found peace inside himself.